Hello, everyone. Welcome to Storytime again from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. The story we have for you today is a very old story, and it comes from England. This is the story of the Christmas Night. Long ago, before Arthur became King of England, when his father, Uther, was the king, there was a knight. He was very well known to everyone. His name was Sir Clegus. And while Sir Clegus was known for his skill in battle and things of that nature, the knightly things, what he and his wife, Dame Clarice, were better known for was the parties they gave at Christmas time. Every Christmas it was the same, the grand feast, and they would throw open the doors and everyone could come in, the workers from the fields, the people passing by on the road, the neighboring lords, the princes, the kings, everyone was invited to Sir Clegus in Dame Clarice's home at Christmas time, and they had the best parties. Well, for 10 years, they threw their grand parties. And on the 11th year, Sir Clegus was getting ready for the Christmas season, and he went to his money box and discovered that it was empty. "Well, this will never do," he said to Dame Clarice. And so they went to the bankers and they mortgaged their castle and their lands. And they got enough money from that to live very merrily at Christmas time for the next 10 years. But when that 10 years was gone, then they had to pay back the money, and they did not have it. And so Sir Clegus and Dame Clarice were forced to sell their castle and all of their lands. All they had left for themselves and their sons was one poor rocky farm with a poor bony horse and a small plow. And so they lived very simply. And unfortunately, a lot of times when you have much, people are very happy to be your friends. But when you have little, the ones who aren't your real friends don't tend to stay. And so most of the people who had gladly come to Sir Clegus's grand parties at Christmas time turned up their noses and stopped talking to him anymore and wouldn't visit him in his poor little house. And many of the poorer people in the neighborhood who used to gladly come to Sir Clegus's house for the parties didn't come to visit anymore. And so Sir Clegus and Dame Clarice were a little sad. After a few years had passed, people had begun to forget what had happened to Sir Clegus, except those right around where the farm was. And King Uther that year decided that he was going to celebrate Christmas at his castle in Cardiff. He was going to Cardiff and he was going to celebrate Christmas there. And so they went to Cardiff and they started to prepare the grand feast, and they could hear the musicians practicing in the castle. Well, Sir Clegus's little farm was not far from Cardiff Castle. And so he could hear the musicians practicing. And he looked at his wife and he said, "Ah, Clarice, the days when we could give those parties, I wish we could still have the grand celebration for the birth of the Christ child." And Dame Clarice said, "Well, you know, we are supposed to celebrate the birth of the Christ with thankfulness in our hearts and gratitude in our actions. And so I think we should do that, husband." And so together they went into the house, and they had a thankful, quiet meal with their sons for Christmas Eve. Well, on Christmas morning, Sir Clegus went outside, and he knelt down under the bare cherry tree next to the house. And he knelt down to pray, and he said, "Oh, Christ child, I thank you that you came to earth on this day so many years ago. And I wish so much that I could do the things that I used to do, but I thank you that my family is all here and that we are safe and we have a house with a roof over our head and enough to eat and some good work for our hands to do." And then suddenly, just as he said, "Amen," he also said, "Ow!" And then, oh, for a great big branch had fallen out of the cherry tree and hit him on the head. And then it landed on the snow in front of him. And when he looked down at it, he discovered that it was not an empty, bare branch after all. The whole branch was covered in ripe, red cherries in the middle of the winter. That was surprising. And so he called for Dame Clarice and he said, Clarice, my love, look, a miracle. Look what fell out of the cherry tree. And Dame Clarice came out and she looked at the branch and she took one of the cherries off of it and she tasted it. And it was as sweet as summer sunshine. And she said, Clegus, I have an idea. I will pick all of the cherries off of this branch and you must take them to the king and give them to him as a gift from God for Christmas. And Sir Clegus said, I think that is a grand idea, for I very much wish to give the king a gift as long as he's just here, but we didn't have anything to give him. And so they went in the house, and Sir Clegus put on the best clothes he had, which weren't the best clothes to be seen, but they were clean and they were neatly mended and there weren't any big holes in them. And his eldest son also put him on his best clothes that he had. And Dame Clarice picked all of the cherries off of the branch and she put them in a basket, and they put a cover over the basket. And together Sir Clegus and his eldest son went to Cardiff Castle to give the king the cherries. Now the gates of the castle were flung wide open and anyone could go in and out, for it was Christmas Day and there was a grand celebration going on. But when Sir Clegus and his son tried to go into the actual keep, they were told that they could not go in. The porter at the gate said, you can't go in. Go hang out with the beggars over there in the corner. And Sir Clegus said, oh, but sir, we bring a gift from God to the king. And he said, oh, and what might that be now? And Sir Clegus uncovered the basket just a little so the man could see the cherries inside. And the man said, oh, midwinter cherries. Now that would be a gift that the king would very much prize. I think he's bound to give you a very great reward. I will let you through the gate if you promise to give me 1/3 of the reward that the king gives you. Well, Sir Clegus didn't want to do that, and so he argued a bit, but there was nothing to be done. The porter at the gate simply would not let him through if he did not promise 1/3 of the reward. And so finally Sir Clegus said, all right. And the porter stood aside and let Sir Clegus and his son go into the castle with their basket of cherries. Now, when they arrived at the door of the great hall, the usher that was guarding the door of the great hall would not let Sir Clegus and his son through. You're dressed so shabbily. You can't come in here with all the grand people. Are you kidding me? No. You shall have to go back outside, my good man. And Sir Clegus said, but we bear a gift from God to the king. Oh, really? And what might that be? And when they showed the usher said, well, midwinter cherries. The king is sure to give you a great reward for that if you will promise me 1/3 of the reward the king gives you. Then I will let you through to see the king. Well, now, Sir Clegus really did not want to do this. That meant that 1/3 and 1/3 was 2/3, and he would only get 1/3 of whatever reward the king might give. And he and Dame Clarice and their sons could certainly use something. But there was no other way to get through to see the king. And so finally Sir Clegus agreed to give the usher 1/3 of whatever the king promised him. And so the usher stepped aside and let Sir Clegus and his son go through into the great hall. Now, as they walked towards the great high table, the king's steward saw them coming, and he came over and he blocked their way with his golden staff, and he said, oh, no. How dare you enter the king's banquet hall in your everyday working clothes? This is not the way you come before the king. You must go back outside, my good man, back outside with you. And Sir Clegis said, "But we bear a gift from God to the King Uther." "Oh, and what might that be?" said the steward. And when Sir Clegis showed him the cherries, you guessed it, he wanted 1/3 of the reward. Well, 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, that's the whole reward. Sir Clegis sighed. He looked at his son and he said, "Well, at least we'll get a good meal out of it." And so he promised the steward the final third of the reward, and he was let through. And he went up to King Uther and he offered him his gift from God for Christmas Day. And King Uther was quite surprised to see the beautiful red cherries in the basket in the middle of the winter. What a wonderful thing. And so he accepted the gift from Sir Clegis and his son. And he asked them, "Please, good farmer, you and your son, please do sit down at this table here and join in our feast." And so they did. And when the feast was over and all of the dessert had been served, the king sat down and he had a whole bowl of the delicious, wonderful sweet cherries. Well, when he was done with the cherries, he called for the farmer who had brought them to him, and he was brought up in front of him. And he said, "Farmer, you have brought the best gift for Christmas. Tell me, what would you like as a reward? Land, gold, livestock? What would you like?" "Oh, no, your majesty," said Sir Clegis. "All I would like is the boon of, well, allow me to bestow 12 strokes of my staff wherever I should wish to strike." And the king said, "Well, that is not a good gift for Christmas. That's a rather harsh gift. Ask for something else." And Sir Clegis said, "I pray you, good King Uther, I do not wish anything else. I just want the right to bestow 12 strokes of my staff wherever I should so wish." And so finally King Uther said, "Okay, you may strike 12 times with your good staff there wherever you might wish." And so Sir Clegis thanked King Uther and he turned away. And as the king went on about his business being entertained and called for a minstrel to sing them a song, Sir Clegis went and found the steward who had barred his way into the hall, and he struck him 4 times with his staff. And then he went to the usher at the door of the great hall, and he gave him his promised 1/3 of the reward, 4 strokes with his good stout wooden staff. And then he went out to the porter at the gate, and he gave him 4 strokes with his good stout wooden staff. And so Sir Clegis had gotten rid of all of the gift that the king had given him, 1/3 to the steward, 1/3 to the usher, and 1/3 to the porter. Well, when Sir Clegis went back into the great hall, there was quite a buzz going on, for you see, when the king had called for a minstrel, the minstrel had sung a wonderful song about the wonderful gifts and feasts and everything, and all of the wonder steeds of Sir Clegis, the great knight. And the king had started to think about it, and he had realized that he very much missed Sir Clegis, and he hadn't seen nor heard from him in several years. And when he had started asking others in the room if they knew where Sir Clegis was, no one seemed to know what had happened to the wonderful, jolly Sir Clegis. And the king was rather sad at that, for he missed this man that had done such wondrous things at Christmas time. Well, while they were all buzzing about and thinking and trying to figure out if anyone knew where Sir Clegis had gone to, Sir Clegis came back into the hall. And he came forward and he knelt in front of the king to thank him for giving him the right to bestow his 12 strokes wherever he should so wish. And the king said, "Ah, yes, farmer. Now, why did you ask for such a strange gift?" And he said, "Well, your majesty, this is what happened." And he told the king how the porter at the gate had first barred his way and asked for 1/3 of the reward. And then the usher at the door of the great hall had asked for another 1/3. And then the steward had asked for the final 1/3. And King Uther began to laugh. He thought that was so funny, the way this good man had managed to trick those 3 deceitful servants. And he said, I wager they'll not ask for a bribe again. Tell me, farmer, you're so very clever. What is your name? And he looked up and he said, well, your majesty, I am Sir Clegis. And the king said, Sir Clegis, yes, we were just talking about you. And he welcomed him with open arms and very heartily. And when Sir Clegis rode home later that day, he was riding on a very fine horse. And when his son, riding behind him, was also on a very fine horse. And when they arrived home, they had the most wonderful news to give Dame Clarice, for the king had decided that Sir Clegis should be Lord of Cardiff Castle, and that every Christmas he was to feast all of the people round in the king's name and with the king's money. And so Sir Clegis and Dame Clarice and their sons moved to Cardiff Castle, and they feasted all the people round every Christmas day, and they lived very merrily to the end of their days, and twice as merrily at Christmas time. And that is the story of Sir Clegis, the Christmas Knight from England. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will join us again on Friday at 3 p.m. We will celebrate the new year with a new story from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. I hope you enjoyed today's story, and we'll see you on Friday. Bye.